Well, good morning, church family. I hope all is well with each one of you. I'm also hopeful that this will be my last YouTube sermon. My plan now is to be back with the church family next Lord's Day, worshiping with you all then. So again, be safe until then, and I hope all is well with each and every one of you. For our message today, 1 Peter 2, 9 and 10 states that we as Christians, we are a royal priesthood. We're a peculiar people. And so, how are you doing with that? On the average, how do you think you are comparing with other Christians that you know? Today, we're going to talk about the average Christian. I want to begin by reading part of a short story. It goes like this. One irreligious man used to average his morality. He said, "I'm doing pretty good on the whole. I sometimes get mad and swear, but then I'm pretty honest. I work on Sundays when I'm busy, but I give a good bit to the poor, and I've never been drunk in my life." Well, this guy averaging his Christianity, he goes and he hires a guy to build a fence for him. And when the guy's done, he says, "Well, how's the fence looking?" He says, "Well, on the average, it's pretty good. There's some good places, and there's some places that aren't so good." The guy says, "Hey, a fence can't be like that. It's got to be perfect or it's worthless, because cows, they can figure out how to get out of a weak part of the fence." And the guy said, "Oh, well, I used to think so. But I heard you talk about averaging matters with the Lord, and it seemed to me that we might try it with the cows. If an average fence won't do for a cow, I'm afraid an average character won't do for the Lord on Judgment Day." You know, the prophet Malachi, he addressed a time in Israel's history in which the nation tried to pass God's criteria of holiness with an average mentality. Israel did some things right. Israel also did a lot of things that were wrong. Overall, they believed that their good would outweigh their bad, and if they just made it into heaven, well, that's good enough for them. I've made statements like that. You know, I don't have to have a mansion of gold. If I just barely get in, I'll be content. The truth is, anyone that gets into heaven gets in by the grace of God only. We need to understand that. But many have innocently said, "You know, I don't have to have a mansion of gold. I just want to get in there." And so we commend ourselves for being pretty good on the average. But, if we get honest with ourselves, we can quickly point out a number of things that really need immediate change, huh? Well, in Malachi's day, Israel had confused God's demand for holiness in everyday living, and their conclusion was that average holiness would be accepted. And this kind of thinking was fatal. Malachi 2:17 states, "You have wearied the Lord with your words. Yet you say, 'How have we wearied him?' In that you say, 'Everyone who does evil is good in the sight of the Lord, and he delights in them.' Or, 'Where is the God of justice?'" Now, the text that, again, we began with, we see that we as God's people, we are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. That's what we are. The context of Malachi 2:17 suggests several tragic consequences when we try to average out our holiness. First, Israel casually regarded God, which in essence led to dishonoring God. Then the nation's worship was pretentious, and thus it was corrupt. And also Israel modified God's divine regulations to please her selfishness, where selfishness became her governing standard. And then finally, the Israelites simply didn't treat each other the way that they should have treated their fellow human being. When they tried to average out, you see, they failed to love God with all their heart. And they failed to love their fellow man as they should have. They were guilty of, I guess we could say, partial commitment. They simply thought that they could balance the wrongs in their lives with a few rights. And it's sort of like us, we know that we should do better in some areas. We know we can do better with effort. But whenever I compare myself to you and perhaps feel a 6 on this scale, of 1 to 10, well, then there's no sense of urgency. In fact, I'm just hoping I won't fall below average, maybe a 5 on the scale. Now, Malachi warned the people of his day that there would be tragic results if this averaging out mindset didn't change. And actually, this wasn't the first time that Israel had acted this way. Several prophets of the past had addressed this type of thinking. Zephaniah said, I will search Jerusalem with lamps. I will punish the men who are stagnant in spirit, who say in their hearts, the Lord will do no good or evil. Now, these warnings ring true today for those of us who have a partial commitment to God and who are banking on averaging out. We need to heed the warning. He wants all of us. He wants all of our being. Malachi told Israel that their actions had caused God to become weary. Now, the primary meaning of the word weary is to work until one is exhausted. God was exhausted by Israel's attitude. From this verse in Malachi 2:17, we see that some were skeptical about God's care for them. And this skepticism led them to say, God doesn't care about us. If he did, things would be different than they are. And their murmuring, it wearied the Almighty. And again, to put the focus on us, not the Israelites of long ago, have you thought how weary God must become today? We know that he expects us to do things. Too often we just don't do it. We continually ask forgiveness for sins, and too often we never try to change. He's weary of the hypocrisy. When Christians continue to be inconsistent, the very God whom Isaiah says can never faint nor be weary, he's exhausted by the sinful nature of those who call him Father. See, when we get accustomed to averaging out our response to God, subtle dangers are going to follow if we take this course. Things that used to be, off limits, well, now they're acceptable. Because after all, times have changed. Everybody's doing it. It's easy to talk ourselves into practices of sin that when we begin to just kind of average out our actions. Israel looked around and they saw that some who practiced sin were successful. And their thinking was, if sinners are going to go unpunished, well, what's to worry about? Others pointed out that God's people were left in low estates, while the heathens, were prosperous. And so when Israel compared their spirituality with that of the surrounding pagans, well, they began to question God's justice. Okay, let's sort of shift gears here now to another group of people who seemed content with averaging out their lives. The Church of Christ at Laodicea, it wasn't hot, it wasn't cold. You could say they were average. They were warm. And that attitude of lukewarmness wanted the Lord to spew them out of his mouth. Those people did some good things. They just didn't, have a strong belief one way or another. They'd become complacent in their lifestyle, and they failed to see the condition that they were in. Now today we're talking about comparing. So how do you think our congregation, your congregation, would compare to the 7 churches of Asia? Are we average? In my personal Bible, I've listed the things that Christ wants from these 7 churches in Asia. 7, again, we understand that as completeness. So we want to see what the complete church is about. We ask and see what the Lord wants of those 7 churches. From Ephesus, Christ wants love. How do we compare there? From Smyrna, Christ wants suffering. How are we doing with that one? From Pergamos, he wants truth. From Thyatira, he wants holiness. From Sardis, he wants genuineness. From Philadelphia, he wants evangelism. From Laodicea, he wants dedication. Again, see, the church is like other things in that the sum is no greater than all of its parts. See, we are the church. That takes us back to our first question. How do we stack up against fellow Christians? If everybody in the kingdom was on par with me or you, how would the kingdom stack up? The point of the lesson isn't to step on toes. The point is to challenge us to do better. Bring the average up. And stop comparing ourselves with each other and start comparing ourselves with our Lord Jesus Christ. In the coming days, God bless you as you strive to not just be average, but to do the best you can to surrender all to Christ. So may God bless us in our efforts to improve daily in our Christian walk. God bless you. See you soon.